Episode 5, The Broken Orbit. Milo had learned a great secret in the silver mist. The stillness wasn't something to fear. He sat in his classroom at the Intergalactic Academy, feeling that new warmth in his chest. Beside him, his best friend Zippy was bouncing with excitement, his 3 eyes blinking in rhythm. But suddenly, the floor tilted. Milo's hoverdesk slid toward the wall, and the hum of the school's gravity engines began to sputter and moan. Outside in the hallway, the gravity failed completely. Zippy yelped as he floated toward the ceiling, his long, blue limbs flailing. Alara, a girl from the nebulous sector, drifted past him, clutching her floating backpack. "The balance is gone," Zippy cried, trying to grab onto a door handle. The school was usually a place of perfect order, but now everything was drifting apart in a silent, slow-motion tangle. Milo scrambled to the great observation window and gasped. The 3 miniature planets that circled the school, the anchors of their gravity, had left their paths. They were wandering away into the dark void, wobbling like spinning tops losing their speed. "If they drift too far, we'll never get the rhythm back," Zippy whispered, his voice trembling as he drifted closer to Milo. "The orbit is broken." Milo watched the wandering planets. They didn't look broken to him, they looked lost. He remembered the other Milo sitting on the jagged rock, waiting to be noticed. He realized the planets weren't trying to escape. They had simply lost the feeling of being connected to the school and to each other. "They aren't broken," Milo said softly to himself. "They just need to be reminded where they belong." Milo grabbed his magnetic tether and a sleek silver helmet. "I have to go out there," he told Zippy. Zippy's eyes went wide, and he quickly helped Milo tighten the straps of his flight suit. "Be careful, Milo. You can't force a planet to move. They're too heavy," Zippy warned. But Milo wasn't planning on using force. He was going to use the stillness he had found in the mist. The airlock hissed open, and Milo pushed off into the silent void. Without the school's artificial gravity, he felt weightless, but he didn't feel afraid. He floated toward the nearest planet, a small, violet sphere that was shivering as it drifted. The stars around him were bright and cold, but Milo kept his mind focused on the soft, humming warmth he had discovered within himself. Milo reached the edge of the violet planet's atmosphere. He didn't try to push it or pull it with his tether. Instead, he reached out and placed his gloved hand on the shimmering veil of light that surrounded the world. He closed his eyes and thought of the feeling of a hand reaching back in the mist. He breathed slowly, projecting a sense of calm and belonging toward the shivering planet. Back inside the school, the students huddled at the windows. Zippy and Alara watched as the tiny speck that was Milo moved between the great, wandering spheres. "Look!" Alara pointed. The violet planet had stopped shivering. It began to turn slowly, its color deepening from a pale lavender to a rich, healthy purple. It seemed to lean into Milo's touch, finding its center once again. When Milo finally floated back into the airlock, the gravity had returned to normal. Zippy rushed forward and gave him a giant, multi-armed hug. The school was quiet again, but it was a happy quiet. Milo looked out at the planets, now spinning in perfect harmony. He realized that as long as he kept that warmth inside him, he would never be truly alone, and the world, no matter how big, would always stay in balance. Episode 7, The Teacher of Time. Milo sat in the clockwork garden of the Intergalactic Academy, trying to find the stillness he had learned in the silver mist. Beside him, Zippy was attempting to juggle glowing moon pebbles with his 3 blue arms. The air was peaceful until a strange, golden shimmer began to ripple through the air, making the flowers hum a low, vibrating note. The shimmer thickened into the shape of a tall, translucent being made of starlight. This was Eon, the teacher of time. Eon's face was like a soft constellation, and his voice sounded like many clocks ticking at once. He held out a hand, and the garden around them faded into a dark, swirling fog that showed a terrifying scene. The dark, swirling fog. In the mist, Milo saw a version of himself drifting helplessly in space. The school's 3 anchor planets were spinning away into the void, and the Intergalactic Academy was breaking apart. "This is the future where you fail," Eon whispered. Milo felt a cold shiver of fear. He saw himself give up, closing his eyes as the darkness swallowed everything. Milo turned away from the vision, his heart racing. Is it set in stone? Is there nothing I can do? He asked, his voice trembling. Eon shook his head slowly, his starry eyes glowing with kindness. The future is not a cage, Milo. It is a map of many paths. This is only the path of fear. You can choose a different one, but you must choose to try again. Suddenly, the vision vanished, and the ground beneath Milo's feet tilted sharply. A loud groan echoed through the school as the gravity engines sputtered. Zippy yelped as he slid across the grass, his moon pebbles scattering. The broken orbit Milo had just seen in the vision was actually happening. "Milo, the anchors, they're drifting," Zippy cried, pointing toward the sky. In the hallways, students were floating in a slow-motion tangle. Ilara, a girl from the nebulous sector, drifted past Zippy, her backpack spilling holographic books. "The balance is gone," she shouted, trying to grab a wall handle. Zippy caught her hand, but they both began to drift toward the high, vaulted ceiling. The fear from the vision threatened to overwhelm Milo. Milo looked at his shaking hands and remembered Eon's words. He had to choose. He ran toward the airlock chamber, grabbing his flight suit and a silver helmet. Zippy scrambled down from the ceiling to help him. "You saw what happens, Milo. It's too dangerous," Zippy warned. But Milo looked his friend in the eyes. "I'm choosing a different path, Zippy." The airlock hissed, and Milo pushed off into the silent void. He felt weightless and small against the infinite blackness, but he didn't let the fear take hold. He headed straight for the violet planet, which was shivering and wobbling as it drifted away. He realized the planets weren't broken. They were just lost and disconnected, just like he had felt. Milo reached the edge of the violet planet's atmosphere. Instead of using force, he placed his hand on the shimmering veil of light surrounding the world. He closed his eyes and pushed his internal stillness outward, projecting a sense of calm and belonging. He wasn't a mechanic fixing a machine. He was a friend guiding a lost companion back home. Back inside the school, Zippy and Ilara pressed their faces against the observation window. They watched as the tiny speck of Milo moved between the great spheres. "Look!" Ilara pointed. The violet planet stopped shivering and began to turn slowly, leaning into Milo's touch. One by one, the other planets began to follow, sliding back into their rhythmic tracks. The common area. Milo and Zippy sat together in the common area later that evening, sharing a bowl of glowing star snacks. Outside the window, the three planets spun in perfect, harmonious circles. Milo felt the warmth in his chest and smiled. He knew that as long as he kept his stillness and his courage, he would never be afraid of the future again. Episode 8 Mission: The Silent Planet. The star skipper touched down gently on the surface of planet Xylos. Through the viewport, Milo and Zippy saw a world that looked like a faded photograph. Everything, the jagged mountains, the swirling clouds, and the tall, reed-like trees was a dull, dusty gray. "It looks lonely," Milo whispered, his voice sounding strangely flat in the cabin. As they stepped onto the ground, a heavy weight seemed to settle over them. Milo tried to jump, but his boots felt like lead. Zippy clapped his 3 hands together, but there was no sound, not even a faint thud. The planet was a vacuum of noise and emotion. "It's not just quiet, Zippy," Milo said, realizing his words didn't echo. "It's empty." They wandered into a village where the houses were shaped like hollow shells. In the center of the square, they found the inhabitants. They stood as still as statues, their faces blank and their eyes clouded over like frosted glass. Milo approached a girl who looked to be about his age. Her name, etched on a stone nearby in ancient script, was Aloan. Milo waved his hand in front of Aloan's face, but she didn't blink. He reached out and touched her hand. It was cold, like smooth marble. There was no sadness in her eyes, but there was no joy either. It was as if the very soul of the planet had been drained away. "She's forgotten how to feel," Milo realized, his heart aching with a sudden pang of sympathy. Zippy was becoming frantic. He hated the silence. He began to dance, spinning his 3 arms and juggling small, gray pebbles he found on the ground. He threw them high and caught them behind his back, performing his best tricks, but the pebbles fell to the ground with total silence. No one watched. No one cheered. Zippy slumped down, his blue skin turning a shade paler. Milo looked up at the gray sky and remembered his time with Eon, the teacher of time. Eon had taught him that the future is a map of many paths. Milo realized that Xylos had taken a path into the dark. The planet hadn't just lost its sound. It had lost its rhythm, the heartbeat that connects all living things. "Zippy, I know what to do," Milo said. He sat down on the dusty ground, crossing his legs just as he had in the clockwork garden. Zippy crawled over, leaning his head against Milo's shoulder. Milo closed his eyes and reached deep inside himself, looking for the melody he had heard when he saved the anchor planets. Milo took a deep breath and began to sing. At first, it was just a low hum, a tiny vibration in his chest. He sang of the golden sunlight, the rustle of leaves, and the warmth of a friend's hug. For a long moment, the silence of the planet tried to swallow the sound, but Milo sang louder, pouring every feeling he had into the notes. A ripple of gold light suddenly shot out from Milo, rushing across the ground like a wave. When it touched Eloin's feet, the gray dust turned into soft, green moss. Milo kept singing, his voice growing stronger and clearer. He saw Eloin's fingers twitch. The frost in her eyes began to melt, replaced by a spark of sudden, confused wonder. The transformation accelerated. The gray trees burst into vibrant purple leaves, and the sky cracked open to reveal a brilliant sapphire blue. Eloin took a gasping breath, and for the first time in centuries, the sound of a heartbeat echoed through the square. She looked at her hands, then at the world around her, and a single, crystal tear rolled down her cheek. As Milo and Zippy prepared to leave, Eloin came to the ramp of the Star Skipper. She didn't have many words yet, but she pressed a small, singing stone into Milo's hand. As the ship rose into the stars, Milo looked back at the glowing, colorful marble of Xylos. He realized that sometimes, the greatest help you can give someone is simply helping them find their own voice. Episode 9, The Lost Signal. The Star Skipper was cruising through the quiet quadrant when a sharp, rhythmic beeping broke the silence of the cockpit. Milo leaned forward, his hands dancing across the holographic controls. "Zippy, look, that's not a background echo. That's a distress signal," Milo said, his eyes tracing the jagged red line on the monitor. Zippy chirped, his 3 eyes wide with curiosity. The signal led them to a moon made of jagged glass and shifting sands. As the ship touched down, the ground beneath them hummed with a low, vibrating frequency. "The signal is coming from those caves," Milo noted, checking a handheld scanner. Zippy hopped onto Milo's shoulder, his 3 arms twitching with nervous energy as they stepped out into the biting wind. Inside the cave, the air was cold and smelled like ozone. The signal grew louder, changing from a beep to a soft, mournful whimper. Milo held his torch high, casting long, dancing shadows against the walls. "It sounds so sad, Zippy," Milo whispered. They turned a corner and saw a flicker of pale blue light deep within a narrow crevice. Tucked inside the crevice was a small creature with long, velvet ears and skin that pulsed with a dim, flickering light. It was shivering, its large, amber eyes wet with tears. Milo knelt down, but the creature let out a high-pitched cry and scrambled further into the shadows. "It's okay," Milo said softly, though the creature Sona only trembled harder. Zippy wanted to help. He began to juggle 3 glowing pebbles, hopping to make the creature laugh. He spun in circles, his 3 arms moving in a blur of blue. But the sudden movement only made Sona shrink back, letting out a series of frantic, broken beeps. The signal on Milo's scanner went wild, reflecting the creature's rising panic. Milo watched Sona and felt a sudden, sharp pang in his chest. He remembered his first night at the Space Academy, how the hallways felt too big, the lights too bright, and how he had hidden under his covers because he didn't know anyone's name. He remembered the cold weight of being completely, utterly lost in a world that didn't know he existed. Milo turned to Zippy and placed a gentle hand on his sidekick's arm. "Wait, Zippy, she doesn't need a show right now," Milo whispered. "She needs to know she's not alone." Zippy stopped juggling and lowered his arms, his 3 eyes blinking in understanding. Milo took off his heavy flight jacket and sat down on the cold floor, keeping a respectful distance. "I was lost once too," Milo said, his voice echoing softly off the cave walls. He didn't move toward Sona, he just sat there, making himself small. "It's the scariest feeling in the galaxy, thinking no one can hear your signal. But I hear you, Sona. You're not invisible anymore." He laid his jacket on the ground between them like a bridge. Sona lunged forward, not in fear, but in a sudden burst of relief. She wrapped her long, thin arms around Milo's neck, burying her face in his shoulder. Milo hugged her back, feeling the tiny heartbeat steadying against his own. The red distress signal on his scanner finally turned into a bright, solid green. The lost signal had finally been found. Episode 10, Where Do I Belong? The Star Skipper hummed a steady tune as it left the moon of jagged glass behind. Sona was safe with her kin, and the cockpit was quiet once more. Milo stared out into the velvet blackness, his fingers tracing the edge of the flight console. He should have been happy. But a strange, heavy feeling sat in his chest, like a stone from a distant planet. "Look, Milo, there it is," Zippy chirped, pointing a slender blue arm toward a tiny, shimmering marble in the distance. It was Earth, a swirl of sapphire and clouds, looking fragile against the infinite dark. It was the place Milo had called home his entire life, the place he had been dreaming of returning to since his journey began. But as the planet grew larger, Milo felt smaller. He looked at his hands, which had restored the cosmic balance, and felt the pulse of the teacher of time. He thought of the silent planet where he had planted the seeds of sound. He wasn't the same boy who had launched into the stars weeks ago. He felt like a puzzle piece that had been reshaped, wondering if he would still fit into his old box. Zippy floated over, his 3 eyes blinking in sync. He landed softly on the console, tilting his head. "You are very quiet, Milo. Your heart signal is moving like a zigzag," Zippy observed, his voice a series of gentle clicks. "Are you not excited to walk on the green grass again?" "I am, Zippy. I really am," Milo whispered, looking back at the blue dot. "But look at me. I've met my own loneliness. I've rescued creatures from the edge of the galaxy. I've changed. When I go back to Earth, will I still belong there, or am I just a stranger now wearing a boy's face?" Zippy didn't answer right away. He did a slow, thoughtful flip in the air. "Home is a funny word," Zippy said. "My people say home is not a map. It is a feeling. Tell me, Milo, in all the stars we have visited, where do you feel most like yourself?" Milo closed his eyes. He thought of the quiet moments in the cockpit with Zippy. He thought of the courage he felt when he faced the shadows and the warmth of Sona's hug. He realized he felt like himself when he was helping, when he was exploring, and even when he was just sitting in the vast, beautiful silence of the stars. "I feel like myself here," Milo said softly, opening his eyes. "And I felt like myself when we were saving the signal, but I also remember the smell of rain on Earth and how it feels to jump in a pile of leaves. I think I belong to all of it." The heavy stone in his chest began to melt away, replaced by a strange, buzzing energy. "We're going home, Zippy," Milo said, his voice firm and happy as he took the controls. "And everywhere we go after that will be home, too." The Star Skipper dipped its wings and sped toward the blue planet. Milo wasn't just a boy returning to Earth. He was a citizen of the universe, finally exactly where he belonged.